Hello and welcome to Daily Politics, reaching you from Trust TV here in Abuja. Here on this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. I am Suleiman. Today, we focus on the political economy of vaccines in Nigeria. The politics and the economics of COVID vaccines are important issues in a world ravaged by both the public health and the economic impact of the COVID-19. Vaccines and mass vaccination projects have historically tended to be controversial issues, especially here in Nigeria. Political polarization, religious interpretations, and conspiracy theories are just some of the issues to contend with. We remember the misgivings around the polio vaccines here in this country in the early 2000s. But how does this kinds of mistrust play out in a global pandemic like COVID? Also, since the outbreak of the COVID-19, we have seen lockdowns and border closures, all of which have led to global economic crisis. But countries that produce their own vaccines are recovering better than countries that do not. These countries that do not produce their own vaccines are more in Africa than anywhere else. And they depend on donations from the rich nations. Between December 2020 to date, over 200 vaccine candidates have been developed for COVID. But how many have been developed by African countries? How many by Nigeria? Because most of these have been in countries and in companies located in countries like the US, Europe, and of course, China and Russia. So today we are asking, are we vulnerable in Nigeria? Where is the place of Nigeria in this still developing COVID vaccine? Is Nigeria truly independent if it lacks the capacity to produce vaccines locally? And what are the national security implications of this lack of capacity, if indeed there is a lack of capacity? Joining me on the program tonight is Nigeria's most renowned virologist, Professor Oyewole Tomori. He was a former Vice Chancellor of Redeemers University and recently appointed member of the World Health Organization's Technical Advisory Group on COVID. Also with me is Dr. Kasmir Ifeanyi, a public health expert and molecular biologist. Welcome to Daily Politics, gentlemen. But before we proceed, let's take a minute and a minute break. We'll be right back.
The board and management of Media Trust Limited invites the general public to its annual Daily Trust Dialogue, themed 2023, The Politics, Economy and Insecurity. Date, 20th January 2022. Location, NAF Conference Center and Suites, Abuja. Time, 10 a.m. prompt. Chairman of the occasion, former Head of State, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, GCFR. Guest Speaker, Governor of Kaduna State, Malan Nasir Ahmed El-Rufai. Guest Speaker, Governor of Ebonyi State, Engineer David Umahi. Guest Speaker, former Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mrs. Ifueko Omoigui Okauru. Moderator, Executive Director, Daria Media Nigeria Limited, Kadaria Ahmed. The event will be transmitted live on Trust TV, and all participants must observe COVID-19 protocols and wear their face masks.
Welcome back. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV. Now, we're going to talk, a little more about the policies of vaccines. And I'll be starting with you, Prof, since you are joining us remotely from Lagos. Prof, today it's not the science of vaccines that is important to us, but the politics of vaccines, because all science is still a political activity. In the world that we are in now, the countries that have the capacity to produce vaccines have produced billions of doses. And here in Africa, we're still talking about less than 5% vaccination. because of a host of many issues. Not just there is lack of vaccines, but there is also vaccine apathy, which will come then to. So, to what extent are we left behind in this, in the production of vaccines, and what does that portend to countries like Nigeria, but also other African countries?
Thank you, my friend Suleiman, and compliments of the season to you.
Thank you.
We are where we are, and we are responsible for where we are. We cannot separate science from politics or politics from science.
Okay.
In the other parts of the world, the political situation has put support and funding and created a great environment for their science, and they are reaping the benefits now.
Interesting.
And that's the problem. That's why I said you cannot really separate science and politics. They work together. If you use your politics to develop your science, you will be in the position of where the European countries are. But the sad part of it was that this country was producing vaccines, human vaccines before.
Interesting.
Even now,
on what kinds of vaccines in Nigeria?
Yeah, we started with smallpox vaccine in those ancient days, and then we produced yellow fever vaccine, and also what called anti-rabies vaccines for human use also. But even right today, next door to to Jos in VOM, there is a center there, National Veterinary Research Institute, that has been producing vaccines in this country since 1924, and they are still producing. So what happened? And this is somebody where politics comes in. What happened with Lagos, which was producing the original vaccine before, was changes in government and changes in policy that destroy the foundation of our vaccine production in the country.
Interesting. Thank you. Dr. Fenyi, we will revisit the question of what Nigeria used to do and what has changed from now. But currently, it is said some countries in Britain, for example, or in Israel, they are talking about the 5th jab for everybody. They've done the first dose, the second dose, the third dose, the fourth dose, third dose. In the UK, a similar thing, almost 60-70% of the population, or the eligible population, have had their first, second, and third doses. They are now administering the 4th dose. But here in Africa, or countries like Nigeria specifically, we're still about 4%, of the first dose, and then the second dose is even less than that. What's really happening?
Well, thank you very much. You see, the politics of vaccine in Nigeria, it can only be compared to the politics with the importation of refined petroleum product.
Interesting.
It's akin to having plenty of crude, but whenever we need refined product of any kind, they would have to be imported. Meaning that we have the right crop of human resource here in country to drive the process of vaccine production. Prof had given a backdrop of where we used to be in vaccine production. To cap what Prof said, at a time, this same country, that same public health laboratory in medical compound Yaba had a pre-qualification by the World Health Organization to produce the yellow fever vaccine that was used to contain the yellow fever outbreak in the entire West African sub-region from Nigeria. So that is where we used to be. And we yet have those capacity, human resource particularly. Of course, it's no news that one of the front runners in the research that led to the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is a Nigerian who trained in Nigeria, who graduated from University of Nigeria before going abroad. So for human resource, we have that in abundance. What is the disconnect? Our inability to leverage our politics to develop our science. Just like he said, we've not been able to leverage our politics. Of course, what have we succeeded in doing? We have rather used politics to underdevelop our science and to destroy the rudimentary ones we had. For example, still speaking about the medical compound Yaba, at a time they said they were going to upgrade the capacity of that particular facility when it was in existence towards the late 80s. Can you imagine this your studio? You want to upgrade your camera capacity and you go acquire a camera without considering if the size of the camera can come into this studio. And so we acquired, for example, a freeze dryer, an integral component in the production of the vaccines we had there. And we acquired one that could not enter into the place it needs to be installed. So there was the dilemma: do we take down the building? Do we take down the wall? That's the kind of politics we played. All that because we had squared pegs in round hole. Fallout of politics. So politics, it's not helping us here in country. You talked about the developed world. The developed world you referred to, Europe, North America, Canada, China, accounts, well, less of China. If you take the real developed world of Europe, North America, they account for about 14% of the entire global population. And so you see the situation, the dilemma is that we have the few controlling the much needed resource for human existence and development.
Thank you. Prof, where Dr. Ifeanyi stopped off leads us directly to the issue of COVAX, the global framework by the WHO, for which you are an advisor on these issues. So this COVAX has been around, for just as long as development of vaccines, but so far it has not translated into greater access to vaccines for countries like Nigeria or in Africa or other poorer parts of the world. What's happening politically at that global level?
Thank you very much.
Yes,
I think we must go back to some of the issues that happened in Nigeria. Then I will talk a little bit about COVAX.
Okay.
My friend mentioned the issue of human resources. Human resources alone cannot do it. You need the enabling environment for the human resource to function. And that's the difference between what is happening in Africa and what is happening in Europe. Not only have they got the human resources, they also
enabling environment like what and what, Prof?
Okay, let me give you examples. I want to do research. And for example, in my lab, I don't have electricity. There's no amount of research I can do if I'm developing. There's some research I have to, for example, take the issue of genetic sequencing. You may have to run your test for about 24 hours non-stop, or even 2-3 days non-stop. Imagine power fails at the 23rd hour. Then you go back to zero again and start all over. These are some of the issues. Then some of the issues, a country that does not produce any of the reagents and you have to depend on customs, and your custom is putting legal and illegal charges on the equipment that is coming in, you are killing your science. In other parts of the world, there are what we call waivers for such things, for what you don't have to improve your life. But when your customs, your police, and everybody is on the way waiting for the equipment you have ordered, so what you ordered for $5, by the time it gets to your place, because customs are added on it, police on the road are stopped on it, everybody, now it becomes $28, of which 23 of the dollars came from internal things that was generated within your country. These are some of the areas when they're talking about enabling environment. He also mentioned the issue of when we have people in charge of research centers. Government politics does not interfere in who is there. They look at the most competent person and put him there in charge of that research center. Oh, sorry.
So the COVAX issue then, what's
Yes,
really happening? Because it is being led by the president of the head of the WHO, who happens to be an African, in fact, and yet it doesn't seem to be working for the benefit of Africa or countries in similar situation as Africa.
A second, I'm trying to get my batteries.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. So I will continue straight off with you. This beyond this COVAX of a thing. There's also the issue of the companies that actually produce these vaccines and the copyrights to the science that they did. There was this time that President Joe Biden, he said that they're going to, in order to make vaccines accessible to the rest of the world, they are going to just lift all the copyright restrictions on the science that led to the. So what's happening? Why has that policy been not been possible?
Thank you. You see, following the pandemic, there were a whole lot of waivers, subsidies, grants, massive support from the government of the developed countries of the world to support pharmaceutical giants to prospect for the candidate vaccines for COVID. Eventually, many went to work. Of course, a good number came. Even protocols for approvals of vaccines were stood down to allow for the emergency development of the vaccine. Processes for data accumulation through clinical trials, critical clinical trials, were also stood down to make for ready vaccine that will come to intervene in the pandemic, as mankind was already at the verge of extinction if it was not in there was no intervention. And so after all that had happened, even before the vaccine became available, the developed world had pre-ordered these vaccines from these pharmaceutical giants in billions of doses. I give you an example.
Okay.
The order from Canada alone, they have order and vaccine access that could cater for 10 times their population.
Yes.
The United Kingdom and America have orders that could cater for 4 times their current population.
Yes.
And all those orders were accumulated even before the vaccines became available.
Yes.
And so there was a vaccine grab driven by the developed countries.
Yes.
And that for us was counterproductive globally. This is a pandemic we have. And if you contain it in one segment of the world and you let it loose to have its way go haywire in any other part of the world, your effort will be in futility. You would have compromised the entire intervention. So having said that, the truth is that what Joe Biden said is mere political lip service. Has it happened? The answer is no. I give you an example. The COVAX, like you asked, Prof, was put in place to ensure equitable distribution of the vaccines as they become available. It had a clear-cut criteria of starting with the first 3% to deal with the very critical population. And then the subsequent 20% and until it's able to go around equitably and in quote, in parentheses, evenly. But what happened? There was a caveat or a window that allowed for a double dealing, I would refer to it. That means these big countries, these developed countries, could deal directly at a different price rating with the manufacturers to access the vaccine. And that happened. And that accounted for why they mopped up the vaccine for their population, leaving the rest part of the world close to 86% of the world population in the lurch for the pandemic to ravage.
Thank you. Thank you. But interesting issues you are raising there. Prof, we're happy to have you back. And we hope, can you hear me now?
Yeah, very well. I can
Fantastic. Hear you. Good. So he's raised not just the politics of it, but the economics of it as well. But among the things he said earlier, there's an important dimension for those of us interested in how politics affects science. He said certain critical procedures that these vaccines ought to have passed through were stood down, you know, in the name of emergencies, in the name of the emergency situation. But that standing down was a political decision, not a scientific one. So what does that mean for countries like us here in Nigeria?
Suleiman, I think time has come for us in Africa to face the truth. I slightly disagree with my friend about that one. And I'll go back to why I'm saying that. You know, when
we love disagreement on this program. Yes.
First of all, when the issue of COVID is, when we're talking about COVID, all of us are ignorant.
Interesting.
We didn't know what virus we were dealing with. So when Bill Gates came up and said what he said, it was out of ignorance. Now we're seeing a virus which is changing and smarter than all of us. And we're running after it. We are running after it, and that's what is happening. Otherwise, when Israel did all their vaccination, they're discovering so many other things. But let me go back to some of the issues where I said I have a slight disagreement. When these vaccines were being made, nobody was sure which one was going to work. Whether it was Pfizer, whether it was this, and proactive countries took a gamble. And they bought, as many, whether A,
But Prof,
B, C.
I have to interject there because these companies and these countries actually drew personnel from all over the world. For example,
No problem.
the company that produced in Germany, these guys, the couple that did, they are Turkish of origin. The Nigerian person that we mentioned, these research teams, as you are aware, usually comprise of people from all over the planet, regardless of their nationalities. It is just that these research centers are located in particular countries around the world. So in a way, Africa and other parts of the world actually also contributed to the development of COVID, maybe not in monetary terms, but also in terms of personnel. For example, the Nigerian person who participated in that is actually trained here in Nigerian universities. So Nigerian cost one way or another went into that. What do you say?
Sir, let's face each other. Let's be true to each other and face the reality. Why don't you have the same research institutes in Africa where Europeans can come and work? Why didn't you do that? These are questions that we need to be asking ourselves instead of going through all this racism and inequity and all those kind of things. I was starting with a statement. Those vaccines, when they were being prepared, nobody knew which one was going to work. What did proactive governments do? They bought up A, B, C. If A doesn't work, B will work, C will work, or some of that nature. Luckily for them, all of them worked. And therefore, so it looked like they were hoarding vaccines. But when you take it from the fact that at the time it started, nobody knew which was going to work, the only sensible thing that proactive countries could do was to buy up those things.
Prof,
Yes,
I have to also ask this question because this is an emergency, particularly as you rightly put it, that no one knew what was going to happen. So in an emergency situation, is it not necessary then to balance profits or expenses with life, in which we say, okay, even though we produce this, but if this is something about saving lives, should it be about we survive first and then others, whatever happens to them, anything is fine? Shouldn't be about balance between life and money, or life and other considerations? Okay, but I get that question straight to you because we've lost Prof.
I'm going to answer you. I'm going to answer you rhetorically.
Yes.
There's what we call science without conscience.
Okay.
Right? Now, and there's also what is called politics without what? Now, let me say science without humanity and politics without conscience.
That's all right.
Good. Now, that's exactly what played out. Whereas I would, assuming without conceding to the position of Prof, most respectfully, that they were proactive. Indeed, they were proactive. But what did they do? They also put in place mechanisms that seemingly frustrated covers. What were they? If covers had a pricing for a vaccine for $3.5, the other window of access for procurement of vaccine for these big countries, for these developed countries, gave them the leeway to negotiate for pricing higher than the covers fixed price. So, for example, you're a big pharmaceutical company, the pharmaceutical giant, and there is an offer for $3.5, and another country wants to access the same product for, say, $5, $6. Who would you sell to?
You sell to the highest bidder.
You sell to the highest bidder. So, assuming without considering that they were proactive, these under political, underhand interest, underhandling, maybe right word, or is what we're looking at. How does this protect the 84% of mankind?
Yes.
How does
In an
that
emergency situation.
exactly that are really underdeveloped and non so? I agree we must take responsibility for our underdevelopment.
Yes.
We must take responsibility. I'll give you an example. Today we have close to 200 listed candidate vaccine.
Yes.
They happen to be the number 61 coming from Nigeria, produced by Dr. Ladipo Kolawole and his team in southwest Nigeria. That happens to also be the second candidate vaccine coming from the African continent. What is the Nigeria government doing at giving resources, at committing to pushing this particular candidate vaccine for whatever it's worth? So we can make a statement
Even if
that
it turns
something
out not to be
no,
correct.
it's
That's how
very,
science develops.
it's very promising.
Okay.
He has passed some of the protocols successfully. So why is it? If you do an inquiry, you discover that this guy and his team had literally pulled it to where it is today with their own resources or resources that they had to get their own way. So that's where the position is. In 2021 appropriation, we had a controversy of 400 billion around vaccine. How much of that was devoted to in-country effort? We also had a controversy of about 10 billion for vaccine research. What had happened with all that? We have also the controversy. The point is, even the supply of the vaccine that we later destroyed last month, over 1 million doses of AstraZeneca, it's also political if you look at it critically. This is another politics. I hope you know that if we come clean as a country, you will be shocked that we may have not bought any vaccine, because most of what we have were given to us.
Thank you. It is that dimension of waiting on donation that is even critical to national security, because it means that if if, for example, if you have a variant that is as deadly in Africa as it is in other parts of the world, then it now means you now wait for it. But the Prof is back, so I want to get back to Prof. Prof, you're most welcome. Sorry, it's part of the issues we're discussing about not having a solid enabling environment, like you mentioned earlier, electricity and correct internet service, because the significance of internet and a good, reliable internet service has become even more important now than before COVID. But the politics of vaccines still. The United States, for example, donated about, as at last month that I was aware of, they donated about 4 million vaccine doses to Africa. Out of that, they gave about 3.5 million to Egypt, because Egypt is next door neighbor to Israel, its ally. So they would like to protect Israel as much as possible. So because if the rest of the politics. And then at the same time, the remaining 1.5, they now shared, the remaining 500,000 doses, they now shared among other smaller African countries like Gabon, Chad, and so on. Does that not illustrate that life is being valued differently in this pandemic situation?
Thank you very much, sir. I mean, Caspian is actually agreeing with some of the things I'm saying.
Yes.
It's our fault. For expect the world to solve a problem, well, forget it. Every country will look out for itself first. And that's why those countries bought those things. And when it came to using those vaccines, they will have to vaccinate their people first. They were not voted in by you. They voted by their people. So they have to satisfy their people. I'm trying to say we need to get out of this political racism kind of thing and focus on ourselves. Is it not the same country where the same Caspian said that we were going to build a vaccine laboratory in 1990 up to 2022? We still cannot make a headway out of it. Is it the European you blame? And then take the issue of the COVAX, which you are mentioning. Majority of the donation came from outside. It wasn't our own money. And COVAX was working up to a point until India had its own problem. Then India now had to focus on its own problem. So every country is focusing on their problem. Why are we not focusing on our problem and accusing other people of solving our problem? That is the politics I think we need to look at. Look inwards. You mentioned we have the human resources. We have all the people who are working in all those places. You mentioned Turkish and all those places. Why are we not doing the same thing, making advantage? Even Caspian mentioned the other Nigerians who made a candidate vaccine. What has your government done about it? These are the politics we should be considering, not looking at other people not solving a problem for us.
Interesting. I think that brings us to the middle of the program, where we will take a minute break. When we return, we'll be looking at other issues around the politics of vaccines. For example, the rhetoric of the anti-vaxxers. Are the vaccines even valid? Should we take the vaccines? And why are we having a situation where Nigeria even has to burn down more than a million doses of the vaccines? When we return, we'll continue on these issues. Stay with us.
The board and management of Media Trust Limited invites the general public to its annual Daily Trust Dialogue, themed 2023, The Politics, Economy and Insecurity. Date, 20th January 2022. Location, NAF Conference Center and Suites, Abuja. Time, 10 a.m. prompt. Chairman of the occasion, former Head of State, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, GCFR. Guest speaker, Governor of Kaduna State, Malan Nasir Ahmed El-Rufai. Guest speaker, Governor of Ebonyi State, Engineer David Umahi. Guest speaker, former Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mrs. Ifueko Omoigui Okauru. Moderator, Executive Director, Daria Media Nigeria Limited, Kadariya Ahmed. The event will be transmitted live on Trust TV, and all participants must observe COVID-19 protocols and wear their face masks.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV, and today we're looking at the political economy of vaccines in Nigeria and around the world. You can follow the discussion via all our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. So we're back in the studio with you, Dr. Feng. Now, could there have been a different, because Prof raised an important issue, that when the rest of the world were even putting out the COVAX framework together, where were the developing countries that, could there have been a different global governance framework that even required, instead of the vaccines being produced by others on behalf of other people, so that even countries like Nigeria actually contribute money into the development of vaccines, contribute human resources, so that you could have had, different centers developing these vaccines? Could there have been a different framework than we now have?
Thank you. You see, in global health security, ability to prevent, that is where vaccine comes in.
Okay.
Ability to prevent. And so it's a thematic area in global health security. Of course, when you have a pandemic, I had said that earlier on, you must globalize the response. If you balkanize the response to developed, underdeveloped, resourced, under-resourced components, you will compromise the response. And the outcome will be counterproductive. Now, you find out that, like he said, everything we need, or most developing countries would require for COVID response, would come from outside the part of outside Nigeria. And the same thing for most Africa countries, if not all, including most part of the developing world, up to something as small as the face mask we wear,
Yes.
would come from China. Over 80% of the face masks deployed globally come from China.
Interesting.
Now, having said that, it's to give it a globalized response that led to platforms like COVAX. What we're looking at is how altruistic was the platform, and were there other activities that seemingly may have sabotaged, I use that conscientiously, the efforts of the COVAX platform.
Yes.
Now, having said that, you see, my worry is this, particularly for Nigeria. You talked about implications for security.
Yes.
Now, the vaccine today had become an item for diplomacy for developing countries and including Nigeria. I just said that if you do an inquest, you'll be shocked with all that we may have been told, notwithstanding that we may have not expended a dime procuring vaccine as a country. My worry is not about procurement of vaccine, or it is that even when the vaccine is made available,
Yes.
we seem not to. And that's the position Prof is canvassing here. We are our own problem. We seem not to have the logistics, the supply chain logistics.
To even
Because
deploy
when
them.
that vaccine came, the one we destroyed,
Yes.
something you got free, if we had deployed it immediately, if we had applied commonsensical logistic chain principle of using the ones that have near due date. For example, we kept it and deployed Moderna vaccine that had a longer date. We should have deployed the AstraZeneca, but we kept it until it expired in our hands. Now that's because, let me also shock you. Do you know that the same people that are donating this vaccine are overreaching themselves again to donate logistics? For one, distribution of the vaccines across the country. Two, mobilizing vaccinators to make sure that they deliver to individuals. That's the aspect I want you to look at. What is the overall implication of this lackluster attitude of our health managers, of our country as a nation? That is what we should be looking at.
Thank you. Prof, that's an area that you have been speaking about since the beginning of this program. Self-reliance, self-awareness, looking inwards, developing our own capacity, so that but some people would say this is still a global health emergency situation.
Good.
So to what extent can selfishness or me first attitude work? Precisely as the Omicron variant has demonstrated, as soon as the Omicron came out, people started thinking of going back to lockdowns, border closures and all these things. Does that not show that their only response that is workable on this pandemic, and many scientists around the world, including in these developed countries, have said that the only response that is possible, is when everybody on the planet is vaccinated. So how does that work for the global politics of this vaccine situation?
Thank you very much. Global health security. The foundation of global health security is national health security.
Yes.
It's as strong as each of those countries are that makes the chain. We have to play a role in that global setup. This was an emergency that came, like you said. And I'll give you a good example.
Yes.
How long have all these other diseases, Lassa, HIV, been with us? Why have we not found vaccines for them? Because at the time it came, it is not affecting global economy like COVID. So it was a global thing, and as I said, I went back to the point, the fact that global health security is dependent on national health security. If you don't address that one, you only, in the global frame, everybody will first of all ask for itself. We understand all you're saying, that if you don't do this, they're going to affect the other one. But first of all, you have to protect yourself. Charity begins at home. So when we're blaming all these European people of all those things, the first reaction is your home. What are you doing about your people? You can't be giving me fire is coming in my house. I call fire brigade to go and quench the fire in another man's house. No, I will quench my own first before I look at your own. We need to begin to look at it that way, and that's the point I'm trying to make. And Casper is cordially agree with me. Take the issue of the 1 million doses that we destroyed.
Yes.
Is it that I've asked the question? How far from expiry did we get it? Nobody's telling us. Is it 2 weeks? Is it 1 week? They've never said it because they're hiding behind all these things. This same country, let me give you a good example. In 2012, we disbursed 10 million doses of yellow fever vaccine in 3 states within 10 days. So is it 1 million you cannot distribute? So there are other things we need to be examining ourselves. Yeah. A week, within the week of Sunday to Sunday or something, in Cross River, I think it was Nasarawa and one other thing, 10 million doses of yellow fever vaccines were given out to add, and this is the same thing by injection and all that one. We gave all those things out in that time. How did we do it? How did we do it? That we couldn't handle 1 million doses in whatever, I don't know how long it came. So we need to go back to ourselves.
Could it be because people cannot see? People can. Could it be because the COVID-19 itself is being treated with some kind of levity by the public? By the populace. Could that be part of the reasons why there's no uptick in the acceptance?
Yeah,
And
in fact, those are the things we should be examining.
Okay.
When we make statements, we should get out to the details of it. Is it lack of awareness to our people? Is it hesitancy? Is it that the vaccine were not even present at the site where they said they were there? Those are the things we need to look at with evidence before we can even begin to move forward and say something. And that's the point I'm trying to say about us, that we cannot live our life to be dependent on donors. I mean, Caspian was saying something about, I read something about the fact that, they are selling these things to us at a much higher rate than they are selling to the European people. Let me give you a good example. It's simple economics, isn't it? We are talking about politics and politics. European Union comes together and says they want to buy 400 million doses.
Yes.
And then Nigeria goes or Botswana goes to buy 1,000 doses. Are you going to get the same price?
Absolutely.
No, you won't. Let me also give you one good example. Ghana got these vaccines for 19 million doses through an agent who is a Ghanaian. That Ghanaian bought it for $9, added his own top of it and sold it to his government at $19. Whom are you blaming? Is it the European or the people? These are issues I think we need to be examining. Rather than put all this common thing, racism or this and that. We are the solution to our problem. We are the cause of our problem. And until we begin to look at it that way, we will continue to suffer. Way back in April, sir, I wrote an article which I sent to our people about vaccine diplomacy.
Yes.
I said vaccine diplomacy requires that you put something on the table. And a very good example was what happened when UK said we couldn't come to Europe. And then said, because you're using COVID from Covishield. What did we do? Africa called racism. What did India do? India said, I have Covishield. You have COVID vaccine or whatever. If you don't take my vaccine, I don't take your Covishield. Britain capitulated. And we all rode in Indian train to London. Those are the points I think we need to begin to look at, not accusing British people. They were not doing. And the question I ask you, if situations were reversed, and it's Africa that is suffering all these things, what will you do? Will you go and give vaccine to Britain? So let's be realistic.
When Nigerians need it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. That's an interesting one. So supposing we wake up tomorrow and we have not alpha or beta or Omicron or Delta or Omicron variants, but a whole new variant, which is now more deadly in Africa than the ones we have so far. God forbid. But on these issues, you have to do more than just pray, do more than God forbid. If we have a variant of COVID that is, as deadly as Ebola was, for example, or as deadly as COVID has been in Europe and other parts of the world, how prepared are we in Nigeria to contend this right now?
Well, what I would say, aligning myself to what Prof had earlier said,
yes,
is that our knowledge about COVID is very limited.
Okay.
It's limited to a 2+ year experience. November 2019 and January 2022.
Yes.
Very limited. Whatever anybody is canvassing as knowledge about COVID is largely postulation, because we have not had sufficient experience and knowledge with COVID to make predictions. I also would blame the emergence of mutants on the politics around the disbursement of the vaccines when they became available.
Okay.
In the developed world, they have systems, they have processes, they have infrastructure. In the developing world, these are non-existent. Situations and factors that will fuel disease spread are a lot more in underdeveloped countries than they are in the developing world. Of course, capacity for containment is also to the advantage of the developed world. Okay. Taking that together, we're looking at assuming we have another variant tomorrow. How will Nigeria respond?
Okay.
I had said severally in other print and electronic media that, of course, it's considered that COVID exposed how weak most health infrastructures and systems are, particularly that of our country.
Yes.
Our own can be said to also be non-existent. You see, my worry is that we have not even learned enough. We have not applied any lessons. I give you an example of what I said last week, somewhere else. The federal government of Nigeria made available for all the 36 states of the country and FCT. No state got less than $1 billion. Special COVID fund.
Okay.
Can any governor point succinctly to how they have utilized the money to enhance their health system?
Interesting.
They also disbursed about 950 million, close to another, about a billion again, to about 36 federal teaching hospitals and federal medical centers. At a time, the Minister of Budget, National Planning rather, went to the University of Calabar Teaching Hospital. I mean, the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital, UPTH, and demanded that he should be shown a tangible project that resource had been applied to. He was disappointed. In fact, he threatened to call the anti-graft agencies for the hospital. And so that brings it to the fact that if tomorrow we have something more devastating than the Omicron variant,
it's a real possibility.
Yes, we will be caught cap in hand. I give you an example. Whereas, even though COVID drowned it, we had our perennial challenge with cholera. Very soon, we are going to have our perennial challenge with meningitis. Like Prof mentioned, Lassa fever is currently ravaging.
Yes.
What have we done over the years to capacitate ourselves, to put resources in place, to put infrastructure in place? For goodness sake, with all the experience we've had with Lassa fever, the diagnosis should have become commonplace in most of our tertiary hospitals. Before the coming of Chikwe in NCDC, we had to courier the sample to small countries like Senegal to make diagnosis. We are ill-prepared. Honestly, we're very much ill-prepared. In fact, something as traditional as malaria, you will be disappointed that if we scrutinize malaria diagnosis in most tertiary, secondary, and specialist hospitals,
you
will be shocked at what is churned out as diagnosis of malaria.
Thank you very much.
Lack of capacity.
Thank you. Prof, we're giving you the last word today because we're just about towards the end of the program, almost ended, just about 1 minute left. He is speaking very passionately about on internal failures that put us at the mercy of, any outbreak of any deadly viral or other kinds of infections, not just COVID. But
Yes.
last month, it was reported that while in one of these government meetings, you could no longer hold it, you burst into what some people called Tears for Nigeria. Would you want to say these are the reasons that Dr. Ifeanyi is saying now? Were there the things that got you to tears? And how far are we, in trying to wipe up your tears as a country?
Yes, thank you very much, Suleiman. I have something to compare.
Yes.
When I was growing up, so I knew what Nigeria was. I knew what we were capable of doing. And I kept saying, I never left this country. I did all my studies in this country. And I'm what I am today. And I keep saying, I owe this country more than I can pay back. To see what we are now, not because the people are not, but because of the environment that have been created by political leaders. And that's what probably brought me into the tears. I saw that this was the country that made me what I am. This is the same country that's now destroying me because of the environment. So, are we prepared? No, we are not. Have we learned any lesson from COVID? I hope we have, but I doubt it. Take the issue that you're talking about. When COVID came, there were only 2 labs, according to Chikwe and the group. Then we broke it up to 140. Go and check their records today. Every week, 40 to 50, 60 of those labs are no longer functioning.
Interesting.
So if we wait for another 4 or 5 years, maybe we go back again to 2 when the big epidemic comes. So, oh no, we have only 2 more labs. What is happening?
Thank you very much.
Why are we building 140 labs? Sir,
thank you very much, Prof. And thank you, all our readers. Thank you, Dr. Ifeanyi, for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Professor Ole Tomori. We hope to have you back on the show together. I think the main takeaway for today is that regardless of global politics, it is in Nigeria's national security interest to develop its own capacity to produce vaccines, and not just vaccines for COVID, but vaccines and also for any other viral outbreaks that may be lurking somewhere to attack us. On this note, we draw a curtain for today's program, and we thank you for staying with us, and we hope you join us once again for tomorrow's episode of Daily Politics. I am Suleiman. Goodbye.